Okay, it's time for a heart-to-heart. This on the eve of the 2024 election. Ask yourself a question and answer it honestly. What fundamentally has changed in this election cycle, 2024, versus 2020? Are you expecting a different result? Because if you are, quite frankly, you're defining insanity. Now, I'm not trying to accuse you of being insane, and I'm not trying to deflate your enthusiasm for Donald Trump and the prospect of Donald Trump returning to the White House. It's a wonderful thing. I love his closing argument, which is no taxes on tips, no taxes on Social Security, and a tax cut for middle-class America. I love it. I'm all for it. In fact, he had a conversation the other day at a barber shop somewhere, and he said that he's in favor of eliminating effectively the 16th Amendment, eliminating income tax. Listen, on issues and on momentum and on even in the polling, I think Donald Trump wins. If this were 1980 or 1984, I'd say Donald Trump wins, just like Ronald Reagan in a landslide. But it's not. We are, as a country, we are one election away now, and it's this one, 2024, of officially sliding into the same territory as Russia or Venezuela, or even as severe as a country like Cuba. And I'm not exaggerating, because if our franchise, if our precious right to vote is not sacred, if it's not protected, if it's been corrupted, if it's been taken over by the leftists, it's been taken over by electronic balloting, that is manipulatable, we have nothing, folks. And so you have to ask yourself the fundamental question: what has changed? Can you name things that have changed in the time period between 2020 and now that have fundamentally changed and improved our electoral process? No. One of the reasons is the 1993 Voter Rights Act, which created these loopholes that now the Democrats have figured out a way to drive a Mack truck through. And by that I mean this moratorium that exists right now, even a couple days before the election, that prevents supervisors of elections from vetting new voters 90 days before an election. So what do the Democrats do? They wait until this cycle, right around August 4th or 5th, and then all of a sudden they dump. The mainstream media is out there saying, oh, Donald Trump's claims of voter fraud and voter corruption are unfounded. It's hilarious to see that, because all you have to do is what I did, and that is go through the headlines of the mainstream media and just pull it all together, and you'll see there's voter corruption everywhere. It is on an untold level in states like Pennsylvania. There's voter corruption in Michigan and in Arizona. Arizona's a joke. You folks, you people, so-called conservatives who moved to Arizona, do you realize what a disaster your state is? It's an absolute disaster when it comes to our electoral process. It's a joke. How in the wide world of sports is anybody supposed to have a fair election in Arizona or Pennsylvania? Georgia, I can't even keep track of what's going on in Georgia. It's so off the rails. Meantime, Michigan is cuckoo because it's led by a cuckoo governor, and Wisconsin's been dangerously quiet, and so has Nevada, which scares me even more. And then you throw in there North Carolina. I have pulled together what I say the dirty dozen, okay? These are headlines from the mainstream media. I'm not going to say which reporting venue it is, but I'll just read you the headlines, okay? Here's the first one that jumped out at me. This one, headline: millions of non-citizen voters in California are enough to decide any election in the state. I mean, you know what the numbers are in California? There's somewhere around 22 million registered voters in California. 4 million of these 22 million are illegals. And they know about it. Everybody knows about it. It's no big deal. Illegals are being sent ballots. So I don't even know what the number is anymore of the number. Remember, California's all mail ballot, right? So they're sending out 22 million ballots to 22 million registered voters, 4 million of whom are illegals, but many of whom are dead or moved out of the state. They're probably still sending me one. I don't know where it's going, but they're probably still sending me one. And then whoever gets it can fill out, oh, Graham Ledger voted for Kamala Harris. That's California. This is the template. This is the template for the United States. The Marxist Democrats want us to go all mail just like California. So you have all these ballots floating out there. So when you need them to pick them off, oh, Kamala Harris needs a few more votes in Wisconsin to take that state. Well, here, we'll just pick them off here because we mailed them out. We know where to get them. We can infuse them in here. Boom, ipso facto, Kamala Harris wins Wisconsin. That's how this works. Here's another headline. Report, migrants, illegals voting would allow Democrats to win 12 extra states. Well, of course it would. Hey, I got a question for you. In my state, Florida, the ballot, the sample ballot, I'm looking at right here. I'm going to keep it moving so you can't see how I'm voting, blah, blah, blah. But here it is, because I know how some people are, that not you, but the Marxists, they'll slow it down and say, oh, look what he voted for. And look where he is. They'll figure out my address or whatever and do whatever they did to me like in 2020. Unbelievable. I still haven't really revealed that story, but it's unbelievable what they did. Anyway, but it's printed in 2 languages. Now, California is printed in 1,000 languages, from Vietnamese to Spanish and oh, by the way, English. But why is it this way in your state? Like, for example, Wisconsin, if you're in Wisconsin or Michigan? Why am I getting a ballot in 2 languages? Have you ever thought about that? It's not just, press 1 for English, but why am I getting a ballot in Spanish? How do I know what it says? This is the whole point. Having a single language for a country is so important. I don't want to get distracted here. I want to stay focused on the vote. But this is abhorrent. And it needs to be printed in English. And if you can't read English, tough. Georgia, a mess. Georgia judge rules Cobb County voters who received absentee ballots late. Here we go again. Vote by mail. Can return them by November 8th. November 8th. Now, I went to a state university in California, so it takes me a little bit of time to do the math. But November 8th is 3 days after the election. So in Georgia, we won't have election results in Georgia. There's no way. You're going to have to wait 3 days. Sorry. You got to wait 3 days till after the election. Gone are the days of 1980 or 84 when Ronald Reagan, or any president, 1976, Jimmy Carter. We actually had election results on election night. Forget it. It's not going to happen now because of all these vote by mail. Pennsylvania is a disaster zone. You might as well put yellow tape around the entire state. Pennsylvania, 4th Pennsylvania County launches investigation. Lee County, Pennsylvania opens probe into 1,500 suspect registrations after at least 600 found to be complete garbage. Complete garbage. Isn't that an interesting term to use? Pennsylvania, voter rolls infested with active voters living in anomalous addresses and voters with birth dates under the voting age. Way to go, Pennsylvania! Now you got newborns voting. And who's going to fill out that newborn's ballot? Mommy and daddy or somebody from the DNC? Another Pennsylvania debacle. Another questionable registration incident in Pennsylvania. Woman identified in Luzerne County dumped pile of applications on the last day of registration. Okay, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You think I'm crazy? You just heard that headline. Dumped all these registrations on the final day. This is the Democrat plan. Why in the wide world of sports the Republicans aren't doing the same thing, I don't know. Because they're setting up the cheat. You see, they dump all these ballots in certain precincts in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is a must-win state, right? We know that. And they dump all these ballots in there at the last minute. The supervisor election has, by law, no ability to vet these voters. They could be anyone, anywhere. They could be fictitious. They could be illegal. They could be children. No way to vet them, yet those ballots are going to be cast, and they're going to be used. And they'll be used, of course, to harm Donald J. Trump. We know this, right? We know this. We know this is why they're doing it. Here's Florida. Now, you think in a so-called red state, and I keep telling people, I don't think Florida is as red as you think. Listen to this. And this is why our franchise is so corrupt. And this is halfway through my dirty dozen. These are, again, this is a headline from the Miami Herald. Postal carrier dumps 1,000 pieces of mail, including ballots, in Florida's woods, a.k.a. the swamps. So he's feeding the alligators with our ballots. You know, oh, don't worry. Vote by mail is the safest, easiest way to vote. Yeah, and your ballot in Florida may have ended up in the swamp. Isn't that nice? Also in Florida, we have another problem with the mail carriers. And by the way, no offense to mail carriers, but we all know what going postal means. Election worker fired after completed ballots fell off truck in Florida. What exactly is going on in Florida? Ballots fall off a truck. Oh, you know, I forgot to close the door. The ballots fell out and they ended up in the hands of Democrats. What a coincidence. Here's one out of the West Coast, Washington and Oregon. Police are searching for the person who set ballot boxes on fire in Washington and Oregon. Your ballots are fine. They're perfectly safe. And you know, the Republican parties in various states are embracing vote by mail and vote early. Hello? Hello? These people who had their ballots burned in Washington and Oregon voted early, Republican Party. Are you paying attention? But more so, what's important about the early balloting that the Republican Party doesn't seem to grasp is it is the data, the early voting is the data that the cheaters use for their algorithms to figure out exactly how many votes Kamala needs in a certain state, in a certain county to cheat and win. In other words, if in early voting in a certain county in Wisconsin, Donald Trump is leading by 2 percentage points, well, what does that tell the cheaters? It tells the cheaters, hey, we got to bump Kamala by 3 percentage points. No problem. Just go in there in the electronic balloting, zip, zip. Oh, you voted for Trump? No, it was switched. Oh, was it? Or wasn't it? Oh, that's a blank ballot. It's a blank ballot. We'll use it. We'll vote for Kamala. I mean, this is ridiculous. I'm not making this stuff up. This is what is actually happening in our electoral process. Here's Michigan, Muskegon, Michigan. Ballots are missing after U.S. postal box break-in. Don't worry. Your vote is perfectly safe. Here's another Michigan. Now, did you see this? This I posted on my social media. Michigan warns of issue. This is Newsweek. Issue? Just an issue. It's just an issue. It's not corruption. It's just an issue with some Dominion voting machines. So we have these electronic voting machines that apparently in Michigan, and as the spokesperson was saying in the news conference, nationwide. So all these electronic voting machines, if you try and vote party ticket, it won't let you. In other words, if you're a Democrat and you're voting all party ticket, it won't let you do it. Republican won't let you do it. It's unbelievable. It's just an issue. It's no big deal. It's just an issue. Pay no attention to this issue. It's just an issue. This is our franchise. And it's being corrupted right before our eyes. We have to end electronic balloting. We have to end vote by mail, wholesale vote by mail. And then if we leave certain vote by mail for certain people, then we have to put guardrails on it, okay? We need voter ID. You need to be able to prove not only that you're a human being, but that you are a U.S. citizen. I was going to use a flowery word there. I just cut it out. It was an on-air edit. And finally, this is my favorite, out of Arizona. Election results could take up to 13 days, says Maricopa County. I mean, now come on. Go on YouTube and put in 1972 election or 1976 election, 1980, 1984, 1988. It was all before we got so sophisticated with this mail ballots and the electronic balloting, right? Yet somehow, in 1980, we have these gloomy faces in the mainstream media and gloomy faces again in 1984 because Ronald Reagan won. And more gloom in 88 because George H.W. Bush won. And then elation in 1992 because Bill Clinton won. All of these elections, we somehow, some way, were able to get results without electronic balloting. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that something? So, I've answered my own question. And you know in your heart the answer to the question. What has fundamentally changed versus 2020 and now? Nothing. Nothing. In fact, in some cases, it's gotten worse. We've had some small victories here and there. Texas has had some victories. I think there was even some victories in Wisconsin. But overall, nothing has changed. So, going into November 5th, I want you to keep that in mind. As we go into November 6th and 7th and we still don't have official results out of Georgia, or we don't have official, I mean, think about it. They're saying in Maricopa County that it may not be until November 18th that we get the results. And let's say Arizona is the deciding state. It could be. It could be. I mean, it's not going to be the deciding state, but Arizona coupled with, say, for example, Georgia or Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's not going to report on election night. It's not going to happen. Look at all the headlines. It's Cuckooville in Pennsylvania. Grammy doesn't like to just bitch and moan, okay? And Grammy doesn't like just to warn you. If you've hung in there this long, I want to remind you of what's on my website, grahamledger.com, and that is the solution to the problem. It's very simple. Are we going to be able to achieve it? Every day I doubt it more and more, unfortunately, and I hate to sound pessimistic because I've always been an optimist, and I've always been an optimistic person with you. But when you look on my website, it's item number 4. I have 10 constitutional amendments that'll fix this country, like repeal the 16th and 17th amendments, term limits for all federal workers, 1 and you're done. 1 term and you're done. That's it. Oh, Graham. But, we have good people in Congress. We'll limit them to 2 years or 6 years in the United States Senate. That's a shame. Well, guess what that would do? Guess what it would do if we had 1 term for all members of Congress? It would basically neuter K Street, the lobbyists. Lobbyists wouldn't be able to own a congressperson from beginning to end, would they? Lobbyists would be in a tizzy. They wouldn't be able to glom on to these people. Also, by the way, term limits for all federal workers. All. Postal, too. I'm talking FBI. I'm talking mail clerk. I'm talking, right down to secretary. There's got to be term limits. We can't make federal work a career. It's not meant to be that way. It's supposed to be service. Remember that? So anyway, I've got all these on there if you want to refresh your memory. Eliminate federal pensions. But number 7 is the big one. And really it should be number 1. I have number 1, eliminate the Fed. Okay, we could switch those. But federal election reform, this is a very simple concept, okay? So here it is. You ready? ID proving citizenship. That's one. Mail ballots, you want to mail a ballot? Okay, but it has to be notarized. That's it. In other words, a notary proves you are who you are. And 99% of the people aren't going to go to that trouble. After all, according to my plan, we'll have a single election day. A single election day. No early voting. No 13 days after. No. You know, when you were in 8th grade or maybe junior in high school, if the teacher gave you a deadline for a term paper, what meaning deadline? It means you got to hit the deadline. Well, the deadline, and if you don't, guess what? You got an F. Okay? That's what we're doing. We're doing it just like we did in the old days. If you don't show up and vote on election day, sorry, you missed your opportunity. You want to make election day a national holiday? Fine. I don't care. I really don't care. You can coincide it with Cesar Chavez Day. Just move Cesar Chavez Day to election day, and we're good. We're good. Cesar Chavez Day. Okay, so single election day, no early voting, no late voting, no 13 days after the election, and paper ballots only. I'm talking punch, dangling Chad kind of ballots, so we can go back to the dangling. I miss the dangling Chad days, don't you? Wouldn't it be nice to have dangling Chads again? Instead, we've got burning ballots, and we've got corruption all over the place. So, what is the purpose of me talking with you today? I just want to remind you that everything's at stake on this election. If this election goes down the way it did in 2020, there's probably no recovery, folks. Not unless it's pitchforks to Washington, D.C., but you've got to get the federal election reform that I've got posted on my website. You've got to get some semblance of that. You've got to have a uniform election code for all 50 states. You must, and it needs to be a constitutional amendment. And the framers of the Constitution would have kicked me out of Liberty Hall for proposing this in 1787, but they never would have envisioned now. They never would have envisioned this electronic voting. They never would have envisioned wholesale 100% in California and other states vote by mail. Never would have envisioned that. Never, ever, ever. And if, James Madison were alive today, he'd say, Grammy, you're right. We're in a world of hurt, and this country needs a single, uniform, national election code. Because otherwise, we're defining insanity. So this election, they say, is the most important election of our lives. Yeah, every election is, but this one is, because this is going to define the future. And I'm not just talking the next 4 years. This defines where this country is going. Is it going down the route that the framers wanted us to, or is it going down the route of Venezuela? We'll find out sometime, I suppose, after Election Day. Maybe 13 days. I'm Graham Ledger.